Good evening all. So you all had a very interesting session on design thinking and prototyping, ideating and all of that. So from there to talking about building your company from an idea to now we are talking that this idea has matured into an organization. So before we probably formally start into the session, I would like to hear from you on what is it that you would like to know. When you have all started this idea and you are forming a startup, you have some thoughts, right? Where do you want to see the startup grow? So what are some things that you would ideally want to hear today? Any few?
So I started my company in aerospace. So we made one of the best aerospace companies actually recognized in India like that.
Right. So how do I build a best-in-class company which is recognized in the industry that I am starting my company on? Anyone else? Any other questions? Any other things that you would like to hear?
When exactly we have to go for hiring process and also like how much we have to hire.
Okay, so when and how? Where do I start? When do I start and how do I start? Okay. Anything from this side? Okay. Right. So probably funding is something that we will not cover as much as directly here because that's a very, I'm sure you have a pitch session where you will talk a lot about funding. But funding is of course fundamental to hiring and building an organization. So it's very essential that some parts of this session today will help you actually plug in those as your funding asks. Because an organization can grow only when there are also funds to build and expand your team. Anything else? Right. So policies, how do I kind of start the engagement once I have, started the team and built the organization? Some of which there are some slides, some of which we'll keep it interactive. So, like Alka called out, I'm not really like an expert in the field, but I'm more a practitioner. I have seen 2 organizations scale, and in my first organization, we had started several rural initiatives. So, it was like starting your own startup across within the organization, and then Samunnati, I've been here like right from the time it was an idea, like all of you, when the idea had not even translated into business plan on paper. So we have seen Samunnati grow, and in a way, I have been part of the building blocks of the organization, which is why there is some bit of an experience sharing. Okay, so before we talk about building an organization, first is it's very important to define what is my organization. So if I have to talk about example of Samunnati, one thing that was very clear right when the company was an idea was this company is set up to make markets work for smallholder farmers. Anything and everything we do will revolve around the smallholder farmer. Like for example, he mentioned about best-in-class company in the aerospace industry. So you are very clear, but then it's very important to narrow it down to one vision of what is in the aerospace industry, what am I solving for, and what is it that I want to be known for as an organization. That is the fundamental criteria for building an organization. So what is it? It is the vision. So some of you will have an idea, some of you will know what problem you are solving. So it's very important to kind of tackle it as yeah, thank you. So tackle it as vision statement. So what questions should the founder ask themselves? Like you are all the founders here, right? So what are the questions? What is the story? What is it that I want my narrative to be? So each one of you, I had seen, you are solving for a very specific purpose. So that story needs to be refined further. So you should know how do I position my story and which industry do I belong to, and that is something that has to be very clearly articulated. And then what is it that differentiates me from someone else? So for example, if we are to talk about the multiple platforms that we day-to-day engage on, we have all seen the platform industry taking a boom, but they would know what differentiates them. For example, a Swiggy would know what differentiates them from a Zomato, a Zepto would know what differentiates them from a Blinkit. But it's very important for each one of you to have that vision that what differentiates. Like for example, when Samunnati started, our founder was very clear what differentiates Samunnati from a plethora of agri finance players in the industry. Likewise, what is that one unique thing that I want my narrative to include is a fundamental thing. And that is what will actually also go into your pitch deck to kind of, attract funds so that, it becomes an investable organization. Then what is it? If this is the kind of idea that I am building on, who should be there in my team? Who's currently with me? I saw, almost all the startups, there are a bunch of few who are co-founders. So you are already there as a team together. Now when you are talking about, expanding this team further, as this idea grows and matures, what is it that I am looking for? How do I build my own team, and where do I find, those team members who can work on this idea with me? Very, very important to have a basic thought process on who can work with me and who cannot. So how does it work? It's very, very important to understand my temperament as a founder, because the initial set of hires, right, at least, till you become 25, 30, I'm not very sure, each one of you come from a very, very different idea, and you are solving for a very unique problem. So some of you may remain a very, very small niche company for the first 3-4 years. You may not really expand like 200 or 200. You may have a very small cohort. Some of you may actually expand it to a much larger base also in the first 2-3 years. So it's very, very important for the founders to understand who they are, who do they resonate with, what is their temperament, and what is it that they want their culture to be known for. Not that you have to draw up extensive policies, but who do I resonate with is something that is very, very important, at least at the early stage. So, and why do you need those roles is something that you need to understand and remember very clearly. So this is, from a HBR article, proven flow in terms of, how you should probably get into solving for your team and building the organization. So it's very important to understand, what is my aspiration personally, what is the aspiration I have for the business. And if I don't have those answers, it's very important for me to jot down those answers. And, more often than not, follow what works for you. Just because someone else is a paper pen person doesn't mean you also have to list it down on a paper and pen. For each, there is a particular approach that will work. It's very, very important to have that very neatly articulated. And then is when, you are able to define what is the direction. And more important to know is, what is the path to profitability? What am I looking for? Many companies have a plan which is, in first year I need to first break even, that is what is important. Or, some companies will have a revenue target and a transaction target. I need to achieve this much of a turnover. And then is when, my profitability comes in. And some will have a larger aspiration of, I need to first, take this particular idea into this kind of a result. Especially, some of your ideas, you may want to strive for specific results before you decide, yes, now I want to grow for a larger team. So all of those is very important to have some thoughts on in a very structured manner, not just, vague random ideas, but something that is, documentable on paper, something that is expressible when you are talking to others in terms of this is where I want my startup to go. And then comes, if this is what I want to go, this is where I want to take my organization to, what is the kind of resources I need, not just only from people I'm talking about, also from the perspective of infrastructure, also from the perspective of, who do I associate with, where do I want to be seen, which industry people should recognize me, and all of that. So typically, I'm just again reiterating, there's a lot that needs to happen before you start hiring for, you start building your own organization. So what are some of the things? First is, where am I heading to as an idea? And if this idea were to scale, where do I see myself? And how is the culture to be? And this culture is largely, at this point of time, very personal. At least for the first 3 years of the organization, it's going to be founder or co-founders driven. It's not going to be something where, you say, I'm building another, let's say, Amazon. Whatever worked in Amazon will work here, right? All of us aspire to if it's a tech organization, we get carried away with people who come with an aspiration that they are working on Google and they want the culture to be like that. That may or may not resonate with you, right? It's very important for you to get that sense of what is the culture, especially in this context where, post-pandemic, people have gotten used to a lot of flexibility in their working style and all of that. It's very, very important for the founders to draw that line on what will work with me. There is no right or wrong. You are now at a stage where you need to kind of clearly articulate that, rather than trying to get carried away by the norm outside, because your idea is unique to you, your startup is unique to you. So it's very important to understand what is it that I aspire for my organization's culture. And then comes, how do I express this purpose and how do I set out this vision? Like I gave you an example of Samunati's vision, right? Make markets work for smallholder farmers. This doesn't mean anything to a layman if it is not conveyed with a purpose, and if it is not conveyed with how is that vision going to happen. So likewise, there are many organizations that have established a statement, but it is also very true that you may not get the statement right in the very first instance. So it's absolutely okay to keep on refining it. So at Samunati, when Anil started this company, there was there were 3 phrases that were strung together as a larger sentence, and then it got refined into this very nice, easy to remember single line. But then it's very important for you to understand what is it that you are looking at solving for, and be able to articulate that, so that you are able to kind of express it in any forum, and also be able to attract people and talent. So this is just a quote, but what is key here which I wanted to highlight is, when the leader has a big dream but a bad team, the vision becomes a nightmare. So what does this mean? Getting carried away while in the initial stage and hiring a wrong person, but your vision is a larger vision, but you have hired a wrong person because perhaps that person is a great sector expert, or has been a proven expert, somebody who has delivered in the past in a similar space, doesn't really mean that they may work with you and they may click with you. So it's very, very important to understand, again, everything is personal in the first 2 years. Though it's a professional setting, a lot of it is highly personal. So in a startup space, you really do not know what comes, right? You really do not know how you can actually become a very different organization, because as every day goes, there will be new things that will unfold. You will get to meet newer people and new learnings and new experiences. So it's very, very important to know, how do I react to changes? So as a founder, how do I react to changes? What is it that resonates with me and what doesn't? And again, many of you here already have a co-founder, but we are also seeing that people go for a co-founder after they have established the idea, right? And now many people are hiring newer, in the industry you see people are hiring for equity, right? They hire a co-founder and then because they want some equity, but they also want somebody as a knowledge partner, somebody to only work. So this is something that very, very important to know. What is it I want for my company? What worked for one company need not work for another. So there is no right or wrong answer. There are organizations which have very successfully worked on hiring multiple co-founders and have taken organizations to scale. There are organizations that decides that I will not hire a co-founder, I may hire founding members, and have successfully scaled up. So what will work for me as an individual is what becomes fundamental. So in a sense, all of that we will discuss today will be more about me knowing myself as a founder. Who am I as a person, not as a professional, but as a founder, as a possible employer of many. What is it that I can work with? What is it that I cannot work with? What is my tolerance and what is it not? So from the founder's perspective then, what are those areas that I need to pay attention to? My own personality, my own style. Some people are very, very innovators. They don't like structure. There are some people who are very methodical. They like structure. So who are you? Where do you belong? It's very important to know, right? And again, what are your values and beliefs? So for example, again, in a startup space, when you are building your team, some people like only delivery, they are only looking at what is the result. Some people are looking at what was the effort also. Something as simple as turning up at, let's say, 9:30 a.m. How important is it for you? Is your belief system something that believes that a person who has a structured work can only deliver, or somebody who can work anytime but can deliver? Again, there is no right or wrong, because to each their own style. So it's important to know. And when we say values, what is it that we are saying as values? Any takes? No, your own personal value. Any example of personal values? So integrity as a value, which we will all say it's fundamental, right? It's important to any company. But the way you look at integrity will be very different from a very personal lens. For example, especially in startups where policies are not defined, the definition of integrity is highly subjective. Let's say you are planning a travel. Typically what the founder CEOs will say is, treat this like your company, plan your travel as if you plan your personal travel. So which means what? Plan it ahead, look for cheaper options, but somebody will prefer a very lavish approach. They may not plan until the 11th hour. So something as simple as a flight ticket, what could have been a planned travel costing you perhaps something like 10,000 might turn out to be a 25,000. While there is no integrity issue here, right? Nobody is making any cut out of it. But then there are some founders who will think this is a great work ethic violation because this person didn't plan, didn't put resources to proper use. Highly subjective definition. Any other example of a value that we can take? Punctuality. We spoke about it, right? Especially in this time and age, hybrid setup. Not everybody looks forward to actually traveling, commuting. So what is it that your style is? It's very important to know. Some of the other things could be on transparency. As a founder, how transparent I want to be, right? You may not want anyone to know about many things in the initial days. You may want everybody to know about everything in the initial days. So where do you draw the line? Only you will know. So these are things that needs to be very, very important and needs to be sorted out before you can set out to bring more people along with you in the journey. And again, very, very important is when a founder is expanding, they need to know what they are good at. They should not try and do everything and become master of all, right? So do what you are great at and find people to complement you for things that you are not great at. So what does that mean? It means you need to know what are your strengths and what are your not so greats. I probably not call it a weakness, but let's say you are somebody who is very naturally good at business planning, putting together business plans and Excels and PowerPoint. Maybe you should work on that and have someone else to complement you for other areas. Some people are naturally very good with people. So maybe then you don't have to hire a HR person. You can continue doing that work yourself. Some people are naturally very oriented towards technology, where they may want to solve for their customer their problems through technology. So you should perhaps not let go of that function so soon or so early on and keep that with you and hire for the complementary skills. And what is very important is, where do you draw the line as a founder? Where do you expect your team to take over? So even for the founder, as you expand your team, you need to have a JD. And I'm sure already you are all working on a co-founder structure. So you already have enough distribution of responsibilities among yourselves. And now among this you are also looking at adding a couple of team members. So who do the team listen to? Especially in a co-founder driven organization, it's very important to let your employee know, somebody who comes on board as an employee know, who is the person who will assess them, who is the person who they should report to. It cannot be dual reporting, multi-reporting right at the early stage, because fundamentally we are all human beings. Even though you may be co-founders, you may treat people very differently. Your approach and your co-founder's approach could be very different. So it's very important for you to draw the line and also define the role early on. So if that is how we are going to approach, it's also important to know then in this setup what are those specific skill sets that I am looking at. And many a times it's also important that you don't have to hire only employees. There are various forms and formats of engagement, but typically what does a startup need? A startup needs an innovator, somebody who will work with you on building your idea, deepening the idea further. You will need somebody who is a designer who will position your structure and your solutions. Especially this is largely all of you are tech driven startups, so it's very important. And then somebody who executes and takes the product to life, somebody who takes it to the market and is able to position it. So all of these three by nature are different skill sets. So you may need three different complementary skills. It may so happen that in the early stage, one or two people may perform all of these roles, but as you expand, which you can expand through several forms and formats, not necessarily employment, because what can you do? You can look at hiring consultants, you can look at hiring gig workers, advisors, and there are many people now, who are looking at taking, offering their skill set as volunteers. So volunteering, you can hire volunteers, you can hire interns, and there are multiple forms, right? Freelancers, you can kind of, make it a project, give out a project, you can do everything. So gone are the days when, there is a startup, you need to employ someone as an employee, is no more a mandate. So it's very, very important for us to remember that, I don't have to hire someone as my employee. I can hire somebody for a short term, I can hire somebody for a very specific deliverable, I can hire somebody, as my advisor. I'm sure, all of you will have mentors. They are very different from advisors, right? Advisors could be only for a professional validation of sorts. So, the term gig workers is something that I thought, I can emphasize more here on, because in India, you will see that, more than 40% of people who are employed are gig workers. What does that mean? Any idea? So basically, they are working like a contractor. They are connected with you, but you don't treat them like an employee, which means, they work with you on specific deliverables. You can have very different payment structures with them. You can have milestone based payments, you can have hourly payments, you can have weekly payments. You can figure out how you want to engage. And typically in India, if you look at it, these are people, who, there is this very, very often used term. I am employed with a company, but I also undertake Swiggy delivery. I also undertake, other delivery. They are called gig workers. But then gig worker as a terminology does not relate only to platform people. It is actually a very well used terminology now. And more than, statistics says almost 40% of people here are gig workers for other countries, especially US. So what does that mean? I sit here, I operate on a part-time basis, on a project basis, where, I am very, very tied to my deliverables, and I kind of, proceed further. So here, it's very, very important to understand you cannot treat a gig worker like an employee. I'm not very sure how many of you have worked and are now coming as a founder. Any show of hands? How many of you have worked?
I was a professional gig.
Okay.
What is the difference between gig worker and founder?
So,
Anything or just?
so it is very similar. The only thing is, with a contractor, when you engage in a contractual obligation, you can also mandate the contractor for exclusivity. You can say, during this course of contract, you will not work with anyone. Typically, in a gig working model, you don't do that. They can.
What do they call a moonlighting or something?
Moonlighting is when they employ, when they are employed with one other format and structure and all of that. But here we are saying it's no more moonlighting because it's a official form of engagement.
So that person can work on multiple projects.
Yes.
You have to pay for the number of hours he spent.
Whatever you have committed to. So, any questions on this? So some active participation would help, because otherwise, it's all one way. It feels like, I have I'm just giving out, gyan one after the other. So
What about, is that interns are like gig workers?
no, interns are somebody where we need to understand very clearly, they come with a learning agenda. They don't come to only do execution for you, whereas gig workers are here to do execution for you. So, now again, people misuse the term intern. Somebody who has passed out, who has, fully qualified, but has not found a job, they say, I'm willing to take this up as an internship. They are actually gig workers, but, they are calling it as an internship because they want to give comfort to the employer, saying, I'm not going to hold you accountable, but give me a door, entry in the door, so that, I can actually add your company to my CV. So, there is a difference, right? And again, each one of these roles that we spoke about, there is a particular agenda. So when there is a consultant, right, you are consulting with that person, and that person's role is not execution. They will only recommend. They will recommend options, and taking the option or not is left to you. So if you are looking at somebody, again, a fresher, they do not become a consultant. You can call them a consultant if you want, for avoiding some statutory obligations and all of that, which is no more now possible. A consultant typically is somebody who only consults. They will recommend, they will give you prescription. Typically, a doctor is a consultant, right? Same thing. Gig workers, again, execution. When you are looking at something which is to be delivered, something which is parameterized and this is the outcome that you want, is where you go for gig workers. You go for employees, you create JDs and carve out responsibilities. Advisors, again, their role is to advise. Accepting it, incorporating it or not is left to the founders and the team which is working. But then typically the difference between a consultant and advisor is, an advisor is typically a sector expert, somebody who is a specialist and is known for the domain knowledge, whereas a consultant is somebody who is probably slightly broad based, can think through for you, can solve, dissect and then give back your own content to you in a plausible, palatable manner, so that you are able to take actionable steps. So, when you are looking at gig workers, it's very important to understand that you should not treat them like employee. What is the difference? They are not available 100% to you all the time to you. You can hold them accountable against the deliverables, which also means that you need to constantly engage with them to keep upgrading the deliverables. Once done cannot be the same, in a startup world, especially early stage startups, the JDs are constantly evolving. So which means, the founder or the co-founders need to set aside time to review these responsibilities and how they constantly keep evolving, and it is also important to notify. And that's where the communication plays a larger role. It's very easy to say, I will manage everybody directly, but you need to give them the time and space and talk to them about the developments, updates, and say, hey, you know what, last week we were working on this idea and we didn't receive any feedback, so the JD was like this, but now we have a feedback and this feedback says we need to make a course correction. So your JD now includes one more level, probably, whatever it is. So you need to kind of constantly work to keep changing the scope and adding or deleting responsibilities as the case may be. So what do you hire for? Again, it's a many of us have not even probably faced an interviewer to be able to say, this is how an interview should be done, right? So what do you hire for? Especially in the early stage, you hire for passion. And how do you assess the passion? No, not necessarily, no. So example, I'm assuming you yourself as a fresher, right? You have an idea and you have a passion for that idea. How do you exhibit that passion? See, we live in a chat GPT world. I just have to say, attending an interview with XYZ, how do I depict passion in my CV? Chat GPT will give me 4 or 5 points. So it's not about what is there in the resume, it is there what is there in the conversation. So for example, any hiring initially in an early stage startup organization, you cannot hire someone in 5 minutes. You cannot hire someone for their CV. You need to have conversation. So let's say now, he spoke about aerospace. Any other industry here? Medtech, right? Let's take medtech because I think I can probably, that's too niche and jargonish. So you are solving for a particular medical problem, right? By providing a technology solution. And now you feel so passionately about that problem for some reason. It could be a personal reason, it could be a community reason, it could be a, known problem but nobody has attempted to solve for. It can fall under several buckets. So now when you are hiring, when you are talking to that person, you let them talk about that problem and see where do they come from. Do they come from the same perspective as you are, understanding that this is a larger problem to solve for, right? I keep giving the example of Samunati, right? making markets work for smallholder farmers. So somebody who we are hiring in those early days, we will ask, how much of work have you done with a smallholder farmer? Somebody will say, if it's a fresher, they'll say, I come from a smallholder family myself. I have seen my father suffering, without having access to money during the sowing season. I have seen my family, borrow loans from others, and I know what you are solving for is something which is critical. If it's a medtech problem, and let's say, I had listened to some idea wherein, they were working on an endoscopy, a slightly sophisticated endoscopy tool, which will prevent invasive procedure at a later stage. So now, how does this person associate with this idea? Where do I express myself? It's important. Sometimes as a learner, when you're hiring for somebody who's fresh, probably has not seen the problem side of these things, but has a passion to work on some technology. In a core tech startup, it's normally, I am very passionate about blockchain, and I want to work with someone who is working on leveraging blockchain. So how do I talk about that is how I will know the passion. So just a call out, not everything probably may be proven by certification or by, the courses I have taken or the projects I have done, because in many, many instances, you may come across somebody who is in a similar stage as you, looking for projects to add to their CV to say, hey, I have worked on this idea along with this person when it was a very nascent idea. So that, they are able to showcase it to the larger world when they emerge as a leader in their field. Complementary skills. Am I hiring somebody who will complement me, who will challenge me in a positive manner? Not that, I should feel threatened, but I should feel that, this person is truly complimenting me in a positive manner, and I should feel that, they are questioning my judgments and they are questioning my thought process from a very, very positive perspective. But an important alignment is the common purpose. That is where the constant engagement helps. So, if let's say you are solving for a medtech problem, and in the first 2 years, your idea is only outreach. You are not looking at profitability, but you are looking at outreach to kind of, create a mark. Then this person who you are hiring should be also coming from that perspective, should understand why that outreach and impact is more important than the profit. In some instances, you have to showcase it as a profitable model, so it can replicate by itself. Then in those instances, this person cannot be a philanthropist, cannot be somebody who comes from a very impact perspective and say, no, that is all wrong, impact is key, don't chase profits. There is no right or wrong, right? You can chase a profit, you can chase purpose, you can be fully impact focused, or you can say I am balancing between both. Whatever it is that you decide as a founder or a group of co-founders, it's important that the people who you hire for are aligned with that same purpose. And many a times, it's very important, like we spoke, my values, my beliefs are my work ethics, and it needs to be aligned. Otherwise, typically, where somebody needs constant feedback, somebody will need constant engagement. You cannot leave them on their own. Somebody will say, you leave me independently. If let's say you are somebody who needs to be constantly updated, you cannot hire somebody who is 100% independent. What they will go and say is, you are micromanaging me, you are asking me way too many questions. So it's very important to draw that line. If you are somebody who is very independent, who believes only in delivered results, you cannot hire somebody who will look for step-by-step instructions from you. You have to look for somebody who will get things done on their own and come to you only when they face problems. So how do you know all of this? Only when you start having more conversations. And typically this is by experience. It is not something where there is a rule book and a checklist and I say, okay, there are 10 parameters, this person meets 9, so is a great fit. This person meets only 3, not a great fit. Sometimes a person who is only meeting 3, but those 3 are your critical parameters, may be a great fit than that someone who meets 9 of your parameters, but that one parameter which is so critical for you, there is a conflict. So it's very important to understand, where can the conflict come from, and so my work ethic and my new hires work ethic has to align. Flexibility and adaptability. Again, one of the things that we have personally experienced, especially early stage startups, where, your company has just got incorporated, you are looking at adding new team members. It's very important for you to look for somebody who has these two. independent of the industry, independent of the problem you are solving for. Flexibility and adaptability are something that is very, very important in an evolving setup. Why? Flexibility is something where I am able to adapt myself to the changes, the variations, the incrementality that you will bring to the model, and adaptability is being proactive, fundamentally trying to kind of think that okay, this kind of a scenario may come up, I need to solve for it, and hence I need to kind of develop a response to this. So and this, irrespective of which industry, which problem you solve for, is fundamental, because the idea is still in the startup phase, where you are probably coming out with a MVP first, then moving to version 1, scaling up and all of that. So it's very important for you to find somebody who's flexible and adaptable. And again, how do we assess? That becomes the key. Again, because each one of us are very unique, there is no one size fits all, it's all conversations. So as founders, as co-founders, when you decide you are expanding your team, you need to set aside time when you will have that mind space to have these conversations. These conversations cannot be happening along with a pitch conversation, because these are two different mindsets, right? One where you are positioning your idea for a possible funding, that mind space is not suitable for a hiring mind space. So that important call out is very, very key. So again, this is again one of the popular authors. There's a quote. It is very, very important for you to look at who your people are going to be, so that the other piece will follow. And again, not really applicable when you are not hiring for people. When you are hiring for people, it's directly applicable. So, okay, I have done all of this. I have hired for passion, I have hired for purpose. Now, I have a solid 10-member core team, foundational team. I have reached 1 year of my startup. Now it's time for me to scale up rapidly. So how do I scale up? Again, one person, it's a 10-member team, 15-member team, it's a family, right? It's a happy family in the initial 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. And you need to take everybody along. It's very, very important. Any decision taken or not taken, that larger team should know. So which means, you should have a lot of ongoing communication on smallest to smallest developments, especially because when you scale up is when you bring in middle layers, you hire other leaders, somebody who has been a entry-level person may be suitable until the organization reaches 1 year, 1.5 years. After that, you may want to bring a boss to kind of, shred some of your own workload. So it's very important to take the team along. An executive team, what does it mean? A strong leadership. You probably may not be able to think about how the leadership structure should be right away, right, when the idea is just kind of getting into a company. But as soon as possible, as and when you get an idea, you need to understand how my executive team will look like. Whether I need, like for example, we spoke about somebody who is a very strong finance person. Do you need a, head of finance? You may perhaps not need, because you may want to keep it very close to yourself. Somebody who is a strong techie may not want to hire a head of technology, may want to keep that function to themselves. So those kind of things are very, very important to decide in terms of the org structure. Emotionally, how committed I am to the various expansion, and people who are joining in should be emotionally committed, because a startup ceases to be a startup only around, I think, years 7, 8, 9. We are in our 10th year, but we still feel we are startup because we are working on continuous ongoing new ideas. So for us, this becomes key even now, when we have probably hired more than 1,000 people, have seen more than 400 people leaving, constant churn happening. We still look for an emotional commitment in that person who's joining us. Why? Because it's important that, they understand who this organization is before they can, commit. But in some organizations which are scaled up, they don't bother, because it's a kind of, task-based thing. I come, do a particular task and move. I don't have to emotionally be committed. Like let's say an accounts payable job. I am making vendor payments. Doesn't matter which vendor I pay to. I am committed to being in the payment space. I am not committed to which vendor it is. So again, when I am looking for such resources, I will also not look for, do they understand the larger purpose? Do they understand the larger problem I am solving? Because I am hiring for that skill set, which is an accounting skill set. that fundamental differentiation starts coming in after the first year of operations to the second year and as we scale. So you need to look for where do you need emotional commitment, where do we not need emotional commitment. Again, largely you will also see some people who joined for a particular purpose will soon start fizzling out. So it's absolutely okay to give them a exit right in the early stage so that they are not that one unhappy person who's pulling your organization down or bringing in toxicity. So for example, today I am associating with your cause, I am 100% aligned, but slowly I see the world, I see that my motivation levels are coming down. As a founder, it's up to you to tell me, Poorna, I think now we are not as aligned as we were before. There seems to be some gaps that are emerging. Maybe it's time to part ways. And a founder should have that kind of an assertive communication to be able to take such bold calls, because it's your company, your culture, and you need to keep the organization together to scale it for future. So I'll probably pass here. Any questions so far? No questions? Very boring, tiring? Okay. So typically what happens is, as founders or co-founders, when you are hiring and when you are continuously building costs, right, these are all going to go in under operational expenses, manpower cost, and you will have your investors, probable venture capitalists asking you questions as to why do you need this role, why do you have to spend for this and all of that. So one thought that will come is, am I going too fast? Should I hire, not hire? So these questions are very natural, and sometimes you may be forced to reverse your decision of a hiring. It's absolutely okay, because it is possible that I may have hired for a position ahead of time when probably I can actually wait and do the hiring. Likewise, many times what happens is, as we scale, when we build, we need processes. So if I have to give an example, at Samunati, when we were expanding rapidly, I was also managing IT. When I say IT, the infrastructure IT. So I'll just order on Amazon. I'll look at deals for the day. I will order 10 laptops because it used to be cheaper by, let's say, 3,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees. I'll just order off and it will be 5 or 10 laptops. As we started scaling up, we had to put a vendor management in place. We need to take 3 quotes, because now you are not looking at only 10 laptops. You are looking at 15, 20 laptops, and you are looking at somebody who will be at a call to service. And now 10 laptops versus 25 laptops, there is somebody who needs to install, who need to configure. We are growing, we want to put in some antivirus, we want to put in some firewall, we want to prevent everything. So there are processes coming in. And by virtue of those processes coming in, what's happening? My freedom is coming down, right? And typically the question that comes is, at the cost of all the process, am I actually becoming more, am I becoming more rigid? Am I kind of, killing innovation? I gave a very rudimentary example, but this is applicable in every area, where, on the go you will decide, on the fly you can take calls. When you are bringing in people, when you are hiring a team, you need to have a process for that decision making. Otherwise, it will not be a transparent process. So what questions typically that comes is, did I put in this process and kill an innovation? If you feel that, then you need to take a relook at that process. You can still keep your flexibility and kill the process. But these are things that the founder needs to pay attention to. You cannot expect that the employee who you have hired can solve for this. And then, other constant thing that will come to a founder's mind is a well-functioning team. Like, let's say there is a mistake that has happened. Maybe, you have a customer to whom a particular communication should not have gone, but has gone. And it is done by somebody who is your first hire or a second hire. And this happens after the first year. So you will typically feel like, now I think this person has lost the mojo. If this person is indeed a capable person, this kind of a mistake should not have happened. So that self-doubt will start coming in. Did I make a mistake in hiring this kind of a resource? So normally in such instances, it's important to reflect and understand whether this is a one-off or this is something that can happen again and again. Do you really need to do that kind of a self-doubt? Many a times founders inflict a lot of self-doubt on themselves and thereby kind of become very cautious or rely on fully external hiring process and make mistakes. So it's very important to spend time to reflect on all of these than quickly jumping into conclusions. So as we hire, right, important elements of communication which needs to be documented in one form or the other, not necessarily that it has to follow a particular format of media. It can be any media format which appeals to you. It's important to have a story about your vision, purpose, what kind of people, where do you want to see the organization grow. Especially early stage startups, you need to draw the roadmap for at least the next 12 to 18 months. Maybe people are not coming in with a 5-year, 10-year aspiration. People need to know where do you see yourself at least at the end of 12 months, at the end of 18 months. And that, when visually documented, is very helpful. And then very important is this communication in attracting and motivating a team. So which means this communication also has to go constant iteration. There has to be a strategy. Okay, if I have to kind of be it aerospace, be it medtech, if my market is this, if my outreach plan is X, and for this outreach plan I have to do this, there has to be a strategic roadmap, not just tactical operational stuff on what will happen on a day-to-day basis, but also at a slightly elevated level, at a strategic level, this is where I want to take the organization to. And every conversation with a recruit is like an investor pitch. You may probably not be sharing the financial projections with your hires, but it is like a pitch, because you are pitching your idea to them and asking them to be part of that journey. You may be compensating them with salary, doesn't matter, but it's very important for the founders to view it like how you view it as a investor conversation. And in this time and age, what's also equally important is building a social media presence, especially on professional platforms, depending on what is professional for you. For this space, perhaps it's mostly LinkedIn. There are some businesses where Instagram is where they need to build their profile. Depending on who do you associate with, it's very important for two things to happen. One, the founder profile needs to be built very strongly. You need to position yourself out there with your idea and thought process, create your own visible presence, and for your organization as you start scaling up. How you build the presence, it can be by way of story, it can be by way of articulating your vision, it can be by way of the kind of people who you associate with. Let's say you have a panel of advisors, it may be by including them on this social media platform to showcase the strength of your company, or you have hired for someone and that person is coming from a strong background. Doesn't matter what it is, it always does not necessarily have to be only customers. There also has to be some story about the organization, because typically people tend to make the mistake of positioning only the customer success stories and the problem they are solving for and forget the people side of stuff. So it's very important for two things to happen: building my own profile as a founder or a co-founder, and building my organization's presence in the social media. So it's not just about telling the story, it's also about substantiative story. So which also means you will not create a presence for the sake of creating the presence. You will create a presence only when you have something to share with the world. But then the moment I create that presence, I have to keep iterating on it and building on it. So the exact time of entry is something that is left to the respective idea and the problem you are solving for. So just to sum up, we are almost towards the end, where I just wanted to kind of leave you with these two thoughts. It's very important to have a clarity on vision. What is it that I am building for? What is it that I am solving for? The purpose, who am I serving? What am I serving them for? And do I believe 100% in the kind of solution that I have come up with, or the service that I am offering, or the product that I am building? If this is there, then I am 100% convinced that this will become a great success, and this is the organization that I am building for. I don't know why everything is coming twice, so I'll leave here. So half of what I have shared is largely our own experience at Samunnati in terms of how we had gone about, be it building for the team, be it hiring, be it building our social media presence, or internal communications and strengthening, or even taking those bold calls of, hey, there was an alignment earlier, now there is no more alignment. All of those are something where we have seen personally at Samunnati. Some of this is by virtue of, having such interactions where we have met people, interacted with, fellow startups. So, yeah, any questions? Happy to share experiences. Okay, yes, she asked. So when you're talking to 4 people or 5 people, there is one person with whom you would have felt at ease. You would have felt, yes, there is a lot of personal resonance, right? That could be the topmost factor. The second factor, let's say all 5 are equal in that. Then the second factor could be who shares that same passion as you do. Who was more passionate about why they want to associate with you. Because you are not going, and again, some of the other elements around work ethics that I was talking about, that I am like this, so I want somebody to compliment me. Those are the things that you should look for than, location, compensation, because currently, we live in a world where those things come, but they come later. Having a shared vision and having an alignment towards a purpose is what I would say should stand first. Yes.
So yeah, so that is somewhere we are also kind of experiencing. So more ideas or ways to tackle that kind of problems.
So scale up versus innovation.
Yeah.
I'll give 2 examples. One, our own example at Samunati, because we are a very innovative business model. We take great pride in saying we offer customized financial solutions. How we solve for it is, we agreed that some will have to become process oriented, like, be it finance, be it vendor spends and all of that. Some we decided will not follow a process. There will be, like for example, we came up with a ratification process. We said we will take this decision, we will function like how we functioned when we were a startup, and people are empowered to kind of, jump and solve for the problem than wait for the process and the approval. But if it backfires, I equally own up. I will not ask the person as to why did you not consult with me. Because typically where is that problem coming from is when you want to have some control, but you don't have the bandwidth to, give adequate time. So what needs to happen is effective delegation needs to happen, which means good or bad, I am there with you to support you. So if let's say your challenge on scaling up at this point of time is more innovation in terms of engagement with customers, it's important to not have a process, restricting that innovation so much, but be brave enough and bold enough to absorb a fallout in case of a wrong move. So you can create various threshold levels. Because we are a financial services company, what we have now done is up to 50 lakhs. The businesses can decide any kind of a structure and approve. 50 to 1 crore. There has to be a process that they need to follow that gives them flexibility, but they need to inform before they take the decision, so that they take more people along. So that gives us that flexibility while retaining the innovation and while retaining the process. So what suits you better, you may have to define. And one other thing that I have seen other work in other organizations is retaining the innovation directly under the founder, and only the codified processes which is replicable being transferred or delegated down. So what that means is, anything where you feel innovation may get killed, you retain it with you as a founder or a co-founder. Anything which is just a duplication of what I have done in the past is only delegated. So then what happens, innovation never gets killed because I am personally nurturing it myself.
Yeah, madam, we need some people. We need to hire, build the team. The company is in the initial stage. Now they are come up with the idea of equity, and you are not sure about them, but still you need that person. And such a situation, how do you respond? Like if I said, you please join with the salaried initially after some time, and then let's see what will happen. but the other person feels that insecure and they want to be in the long term, but at the initial stage itself they have to be very clear that they have to come up with the numbers. So how do we respond in such a situation?
So, again, equity as a way of compensation in India is very nascent. And especially when it is a startup, it is appealing only when you are backed by a large VC. Otherwise, equity as a way of attracting talent, I would say, will not work in the early stages. What will work is a combination of equity and a fixed salary. So, for example, somebody says, I want X. You can tell them, I can pay you 75% of X as cash. The 25 will come to you as equity. You and I are co-creating this company in the initial stage, and they need a path to be shown, right? It's very important to do that. The second way to tackle it would be not look for hiring employees in such roles, but look for hiring, more of two different kinds of talent. One, somebody who is kind of, reached a stage where they're not looking at compensation. They are okay with equity. Typically, some of the advisors fall in that category, where you custom create the role of an advisor and say you are not just an advisor, you are also going to be working with me as a contractor and on a basis, but I will pay you on delivery and I will partake with you on equity. So, some of the large consultants, they work on equity share basis. They will say, I will take your company from X to 4X. If I do 4X, you give me 3% of, stake.
It's kind of proven. Suppose if they've done something and after that you think about it.
Yes.
But when it comes in initial stage, it needs some time, like
Yes.
travel. Yeah.
So, again, I would say whenever you are preparing your business plan, keep some budget for compensation. Do not, in the interest to show profitability, many founders, what they do is they show compensation as lower and then say, I'm not able to attract talent. And, many times as a founder, CEO, when you are hiring also, you may need to pay out some money to get talent. For example, working with some exclusive search firms, so that, you get very niche talent, you may have to pay them some money. And these days, one of the newer models is, even such consultants, they say, you pay me equity. But again, where do you park equity is equally important. They will say, I will close all your 15 positions, give me 0.5% of the stake or 1%, 2% and all of that. There again, it's very important for you to understand what does it mean for you aligned with your business plan. And normally where do the consultants propose it is where when they see the idea is a great idea, it will scale up much faster. But that's something that you may not want as a founder. Because at Samunati, when we were looking at working and scaling up, we had actually said, our founder had said no to many such proposals. Because it was very clear that we do not want to take that route. Whereas some of the new age companies take that route and they make it a large success story. We would have seen several posts on LinkedIn on this person made so much money because of their stake at the right time and all of that. So depending on what story you want to create. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks.